We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely immense.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobsta, the father of disinformation. And today we are joined by Shannon, a.k.a. Mama Shah. Shannon, if you could, for the audience, just introduce yourself and describe sort of the nature of what you're here to talk about today.
Hey, everyone. Like I said, my name's Shannon. I am a Christian, but I came out of the occult and Satanism, and I'm here to share my testimony. It's sort of like split into two sections where I became a Christian, and then within the last year or so, I realized that the spiritual forces of darkness are very real and attached to Christians too. So that's what I'm here to talk about.
Very cool. So we were suggested you were suggested to us by Bradley Lyle, and I listened to your interview on there, and I didn't want to like ruin the whole story myself, but I think it would be cool to start at the beginning of what was going on in your life. How did you get mixed up in this stuff, and like how does your story play out? Like how does one get into witchcraft and the occult?
So I was raised Christian, kind of like my parents took me to like a Presbyterian church a couple of times growing up. But then after they got divorced, kids are dramatic and like especially teenagers. So as a young teenager, my parents were divorced. They didn't have very many friends. And I was one of those, like a typical goth 90s, early 2000s teenager. And so I found a book at Borders on witchcraft, sort of advertised to teenagers. And up to that point, I had no idea that witchcraft was anybody actually believed in it. Like I thought it was something on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Charmed. So that was sort of my perspective on it. And then once I realized it was real, I was like, hell yeah, like why not, like let's dive in. So
it's funny. I think Brad set us up here because he suggested our previous guest Nix, who basically covered all the sects of Satanism. And just yesterday we talked about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we talked about like soft occultism, we talked about witchcraft being hokey, we talked about like goth and the style of like, this kind of like this soft entry into the occult and Satanism. And here we are today talking to somebody who this stuff just seemed to work on. So
that's interesting. Brad seemingly pitching us an underhand throw here when it comes to. It's really interesting that you're talking about. I was just in this bookstore the other day, Books A Million, and there is like an entire new age witchcraft occult section, and it does have a teenage bent to it.
Yep.
And a lot of that stuff is what they pitch at teenagers. And I don't want to be the type of person that's like, don't watch Harry Potter. But these things do effectively act as a gateway. And I'm not the type of person that tells people to stay away from it because I think your journey is your own. Here you are sitting before us, right? Who you seemingly came to Christ through the back door of the church. That's kind of the expression that I use when it comes to people who first found their way through the occult and then end up to Christianity. It's just interesting though that you're here telling us it was a book on witchcraft that was aimed at teenagers. It's like, well, there you go. The door does work.
Yep. Well, I mean, teenagers are very impressionable and they care a lot more about social standing and like appearance and everything, like poetry, like dark poetry, like all of that cheesy stuff. That's all teenager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's cheesy to us, but they obviously I got super into it.
Right. So what about it was so alluring? Because you said initially when you had gotten into it, you didn't really believe anybody believed in this.
Right.
And then there was something that was tangible enough that kept you there. What was that?
I thought it was attractive. There was some sexual appeal and the whole aesthetic to, like the goth subculture, and I was very overweight at that time. Like I was 230 pounds in middle school, and I think that played into it also, was like wanting some sort of release to like escape myself and escape my family, escape everything. And also witchcraft offers you like control. So you can control a world that is spiraling out of control. And like I felt out of control in my body, and it's a multifaceted issue. But yes, so I got into witchcraft, and I was sort of like toyed around with it and built an altar and things. And I tried a few spells, and I ended up doing basically like a love spell on this kid that I had this massive crush on. And I left a candle burning in my room. And I left for school with the candle burning, and naturally, my room caught on fire.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, and when I got home from school, like the whole house was filled with smoke damage. My room had been like burned, and but the spell worked. Which, if you know anything about magic, or like the law of what is it called? I can't remember the word.
Attraction.
Yeah, well, not the law of attraction, but in a way. So when you sacrifice things to like an entity or like a spell or whatever, like it can sort of increase the power. Is like
right.
the
So
idea.
as far as your offerings go, you kind of offered
Your
up
entire room.
Right.
Wow.
And it worked.
Which
worked.
is filled with things that are beloved to you, right? If
Right.
you're a teenager in your room that's filled with all of your memories, so that was a big sacrifice.
Burned all your shit. Let me,
Yeah.
this might be, if you don't want to, don't answer it, but is there a specific name entity that's involved with, because I assume that there is going to be a different principality for this sort of magic, this sort of spell that you're doing. Were you in that deep into it?
No. So at that time, I didn't have any idea about like demons, or I was into goddesses. So I was like sacrificing to like Diana or Hecate or Hecate, however you pronounce her name. And so I had been, after that spell, I started to be attacked by shadow people, but I didn't have any concept about demons. And so like that didn't come in until a lot later. So
how effective was this spell? You said that it
worked. Yeah.
It worked. So he, within like a couple of months, he asked me out, and I quickly realized I did not like him. He's like, yeah. And,
this guy's a simp.
yes. And so I broke up with him, and he, all the way through high school into college, he had a thing for me, and would sort of, I think, to like an obsessive level, because I became like a full-blown lesbian in college, and I like bought the leftist liberal, the whole pie. Like I ate it all, and I was like full-blown literally blue-haired, like all of it. But even through all of that whole time, he had like an obsession kind of thing going. So I personally think, like looking back, I don't think it was actually the spell that worked, but probably like demonic oppression involved there. That's what I think now. But back then, I thought my magic had worked.
I want to ask you a question.
Can I circle back before you
ahead,
move on? So you just said shadow people attacking you. Were these were you able to tell, were those entities or were those people that are astral projecting, like you opened up a door and now they have access to you? What do you
I
think?
don't know. I'm not sure. I think that they were entities. I think because it was like choking and like holding me down and everything, and it would happen on like a consistent basis. So it could be astral projection. I do have something related to that when I was a kid, long before I ever tried witchcraft, there was a, a Satanist that lived at a house a couple houses down from me, and I think that he had like a thing for kids, and he would like we'd have our pool out as like a little kid and be like swimming, me and my brother, and he would just be standing there watching us. And I around that same time I would wake up sometimes at night and there would be like a shadow figure. Not, it's more like a static, like on the old TVs, there'd be like white noise or static on the TV when it wasn't connected to anything. Um, a figure that looked like that, just static, would be like standing in my doorway looking at me. And it happened like numerous times.
Have you
And
ever heard, Shannon, other people's descriptive of that static man? Because I've heard that descriptive several times.
have you? I've only
Yeah.
heard, I talked to Tony Merkel about it, and he said that he had a dream once about like a static person, but that's the only person I've heard that about the static people.
It's
But
just
I
interesting because
assume,
it seems to be like repeat. It's very far and few in between that you find somebody with an experience that somebody else hasn't also seen something similar. And I think that just speaks to the categorization of entities that are in this realm that we can't see. It's not a random thing.
yeah,
Oftentimes people are visited by the same entities.
yeah, man,
You know, you said something before that you fell into the whole gambit of, leftism or liberalism, becoming a lesbian at some point.
yeah,
And you even said like the blue hair. It's fascinating because these are political and cultural alignments that always seem to meet this end of the spiritual spectrum.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And I just think that that's fascinating because that's not the forward facing, mask of the movement, but it's always an element to it. And
yeah,
it's I don't know what it is. It's like something about these ideologies and these spiritual practices, they prey on people who are disenfranchised from the general population. So people that are outliers that have had a negative experience one way or the other socially
yeah,
often fall into these things. It's really like these things are parasitic or
yeah.
prey driven, and they're waiting for somebody to take advantage of.
I think that like wounds like that, like I'm sorry if y'all can hear that, but I think that on the spirit realm, we have when we go through social traumas and just whatever, like emotional trauma, it can leave windows open to our bodies, and I think that that window like leaves opportunity for parasites, like you said, to climb in through and like inhabit and torment us. And it sort of like leaves us vulnerable, especially if you don't have like the armor of God, for example, which I had no idea what that even was until like a couple of years ago. And I think, yeah, I think that's exactly right.
We talk about it on the show often, and it's certainly a contentious topic because it's a touchy one. But it does seem like within these organizations there is a uplifting of women to a higher spiritual authority place. And when I mean these organizations, I mean like covens and
Mhm.
at the top of the show, Top Lobster said that yesterday we were discussing various sects of Satanism and such. Within these organizations, they'll elevate women to a high spiritual place. And I find it interesting that the church doesn't do that. And I just wonder if it's because women are particularly spiritually vulnerable. I think in some ways, women are a bit more in tune with the spiritual realm. They can interact with it. They're subjected to it more. It can interact with them a little bit more than men. And I think when you take women and you strip them of their spiritual understanding, but you cannot remove that interaction that still happens to them, that's where things go wrong because now they don't have a map and they seek to further their interactions with this thing that's communing with them. and then we end up with this situation where you have the mothers of darkness or what have you.
Yeah, I think that there is some truth to that, and I don't know if you think it's like church tradition or like I think there's also some like misunderstanding of or misinterpretation of like the writings of Paul about like women shouldn't like speak in church and things like that. Yeah, it does seem like women are by and large more in tune spiritually. Um, and it's also the serpent spoke to Eve. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I do think that that's the doorway. If
Yeah.
you want to corrupt people, it seems that you can leverage women. And I think this is a mistake that happens over and over again where we lose our spiritual understanding, but
Yeah.
it never stops interacting with us, in particular women. And so, okay, so let's I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's continue this so you are for a period, you're really immersed in this culture, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you went through this socially, culturally, politically, and of course spiritually. How do you end up getting to
Did you end up like finding a group or something like that, or is it
Yeah.
real? Okay.
In high school, I found friends and we did form a coven of sorts. And it wasn't, I mean, we did some rituals and things, but it wasn't anything super hardcore. But I mean, we did do some magic together, and we also we did like study groups like on magic and like paganism and things. And I mean, it's a cheesy goth clique, you know. So
what did you try to do, if anything, about this shadow people? You said that you were having instances where it seemed like you were being choked and such. Did you take any recourse?
No, that would have been smart. I was an idiot, of course. So, so I knew intuitively that these shadow people were coming at me because of the witchcraft, performing magic. I felt like I had opened a door, and I stepped back from magic for a short period of time. But I mean, ultimately, I just accepted that they were going to happen, and they began happening less frequently. But I did experience like sleep paralysis and like haunting situations. But yeah, I never thought, it never occurred to me to try and protect myself. I mean, I would do like salt circles and things, but yeah, we didn't have the internet back then. So it wasn't as easy to identify things like that. And I didn't really understand like the mechanics of magic until later in life. So yeah.
These books, what are they telling you to do? I never really thought about that much. You have a book on witchcraft in the teenage section in your local bookstore. What is it about?
So it'll go through. So the book that I had specifically, or I had a few books, but they basically did like a retelling of how women used to be in power. So like there was goddess worship, and then as like the pendulum swung towards masculinity, Christianity came in, and like the Sky Father, and so masculinity took over, and then now the pendulum is swinging back towards feminism. So there's like a dualistic balance that happens, and like every 2,000 years, the pendulum will swing, is what this book said. Okay, and it like retold how Christianity was just a construct from Constantine to rule Rome and to unite the pagan empire, and or the Roman Empire under one God. And it's like it had some seeds of truth to it, but it was like a revisionist history. And then it also taught you how to build altars. It gave you information on different deities, and it was like the basic instructions on like how to do a spell and how to protect yourself during the spell with like the salt circle and calling on the different powers from north, east, southwest, and all of that stuff. So
This altar, you said at one point you had built an altar.
yes.
Did you make an effort to dedicate that altar to any particular deity?
Yes, I preferred Artemis and Diana. Let me see if I can.
This show is brought to you by the Van Man Company. If you're like me, then you're constantly trying to avoid products that contain harmful chemicals, especially when it comes to skincare and hygiene. From fluoride in the toothpaste to aluminum in the deodorants, avoiding these products can become a full-time job. That's why we're excited to team up with the Van Man Company to bring our listeners a solution. The Van Man Company offers a range of incredible products, like their Miracle Tooth Powder, made from natural ingredients like peppermint oil, ancient sea salt, and baking soda. And the best part? It's 100% fluoride free. They even offer an aloe mouth rinse. Or how about their tallow and zinc sunscreen, made from ingredients like organic olive oil, organic beeswax, and 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef tallow. And there's more. With products like tallow and honey soap, coconut and magnesium deodorant, and peppermint beeswax lip balm, you can't go wrong. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered. Listeners of this show can use promo code Nephilim at checkout to receive 10% their entire order at vanman.shop, or you can click on the link in the description below. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephilim, for 10% off your entire order at vanman.shop. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered.
Sorry, my husband's work computer keeps going off.
I wasn't sure if that was you or Top there.
No, it's okay. Yeah, you could figure that out because this is pre-taped, so we could edit that. I'll bookmark it. Boop.
Oh yeah.
How cool is that?
That's
We used to usually go live, and it's like, all right, well, I guess we'll just struggle through it, but don't worry about it.
Thank you.
I'm going to take this opportunity for a quick pee break. Then I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm here looking up Artemis. So it's a deity, a patron protector of young children, especially young girls.
Yep.
Interesting. This is an ancient Greek god. So
Yep.
on this show here, we kind of tie the idea of these ancient deities, especially from the Greek pantheon. We tie them back to possibly the Nephilim, possibly the fallen angels. Some of them, like Baal and Zeus, have a lot of overlap as far as I think it's like the Triton that he holds. And I mean, even if you look at the Statue of Liberty, that kind of resembles Baal in a certain way. So we think that some of these deities, most of these deities, are just rebranded and retold to us in a different way, and you worship them under a different name.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's exactly right. And the pagans back in biblical times knew this. Like, their gods had many names. So the same deity would shift names, like Ishtar, and then she has a lot of similarities, in my opinion, to like Kuan Yin, who is like an Indian goddess of death, but they have like these similarities where it's like, as people moved throughout, the European continent and Africa and everything, like they brought their gods with them. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, David, we're just like recapping just the rebranding. And it's kind of interesting, as you popped into the StreamYard before, we were talking about aliens and what we think is going to happen there. And we've been saying for a long time as well, aliens just seem like a rebranding of demonic entities, or possibly Nephilim or something. I don't know. Dave, what are we thinking here?
I mean, I think that there's several elements to the alien thing, whether or not it's reverse engineered craft, or even it doesn't have to be reverse engineered. It could just be technology that's been suppressed by our own military industrial complex. But then there is an element that seems to be very real. I just don't think they're from outer space. I think that more than likely they're these kind of ancient adversarial biblical entities, and they've figured out ways through technology and such to interact with this realm a little bit more concretely.
Yeah.
But it speaks to human beings, our thirst for knowledge also plays really well with our ego in such a way that if you rebrand something and present it to someone, they will look at that and then go, now I understand it. And that understanding it like bolsters their ego. So in a way, like you're talking about revisionist history from this witchcraft book.
Yeah.
You read this book and there is an egocentric element to it where you go, I now have deeper gnosis. I have deeper understanding of a topic. And then it folds into your rhetoric and the conversations that you have. Well, actually, this isn't true. What really happened is 2,000 years ago, things you know what I mean? And it's like somehow that information gets tied into your personality. And I think that it's so clever, the rebranding aspect of things, because it plays off of, natural human proclivities to kind of just want to be the best, and we know it all, and we have the coveted knowledge that nobody else has. And so I think that it's not just unique to aliens. Even, you're talking about Hecate, right? And Diana and such. And I think there's real precedent for at least Hecate or Hecate, however you would pronounce it, being Lilith. The night monster that's spoken about in the Bible, this female negative spirit that typically lures men. I think it's where we get the idea of like the siren as well, or the harpy. They described Lilith as a harpy, which I find fascinating. But there is something there where, you've taken this character and it's the same character, but you've rebranded her for Norse mythology, for maybe a Native American bent, but it's the same one and it does the same things. And but now I know her as Hecate, or I know her as X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I have gnosis, a deeper understanding of this subject, and you lean on that and mistake that for the ability to trust this topic, and that's where things go really wrong. But yeah, it's over and over again, things get rebranded, and it just hijacks our psychology, and we get wrapped up in it.
I think it's so interesting. It's terrifying, but also interesting. My dad was obsessed with Native American lore, Native American history, Native American everything. We have like a minuscule amount of like Choctaw, and he had all of like these flutes and dream catchers and all of this stuff inside of our house. And I would have like this reoccurring nightmare where there was a like a bird monster trying to climb in through my window. And this happened, it was the exact same dream several times. And I would be, and this was in waking reality, like in real life, I would be sitting in my room, like on my top bunk, and I would see like these feathers, like go like above my bed and then down, and I would like go and look and there'd be nothing there. And like, this happened before I started getting into witchcraft. And I feel like maybe like spiritually something was like already had its grips in me and was like sort of like pushing me in like this direction. And I don't know, I just think it's interesting, like with the Lilith tie-in and like
the harpy aspect.
Yes.
Yeah. That's something too. You'll see Isis depicted as having bird wings, or most of these are fallen angels or some offshoot of them.
Yeah.
It always seems that wings are an element.
Yeah. Lilith has like bird feet, right?
Yeah.
Harpies, yeah. So harpies they have the lower half of a bird, more or less, with talons and gigantic wings, and the upper half of a woman. But
it's kind of interesting, right? Because it's like you hear this kind of story a lot where if someone gets involved in this stuff, there are precursors in their childhood or their past that they're like, I remember this happening, and then boom, all of a sudden I'm waist deep in the occult. It's like, I don't want to say, I mean, we have free will, but it's almost like there's a mark on you, or there's like a susceptibility to you that they're like, I know that I can get in. It's just a matter of time, and they're just in waiting.
Right. And is it a matter of you doing something that triggers this attention that they're now giving you, or is it a matter of maybe a generational thing, for example? And this is very effectively brings us to the question that I want to ask you. But when I was younger, my grandmother, who I love dearly, was, you know, she thought she was a clairvoyant. She was writing papers on remote viewing. She was a victim of alien abduction phenomenon when she was a child. She didn't know what it was until she got older, and there was cultural context for what she had gone through, and she realized, oh wow, other people are experiencing this as well. But I have a series of strange things that they've always happened throughout my life, and I think in great deal it probably has to do with some sort of like what the Bible might call generational iniquity. So I'm wondering, for you, Shannon, is there anything that you could look to in your past where maybe a relative was involved heavily in something that could have been passed down, or does any of that seem to resonate with you?
I do believe in generational curses. Like I said, my dad was very into like Native American religion and Native American just culture in general. And his mother was like a quarter Choctaw, and she was Christian, but she would also like she had visions and things, and I don't know, but I know that my father was into all of that, and so we have that like in our bloodline. So I don't know specifically though. And on my mother's side, they were Catholic, so for like generations. So yeah,
I
but
do
I know my
wonder,
dad.
like, for example, if you had stayed on the path that you were on, then do you believe maybe generations after you could have been, because that's what it seems like from where I'm
I think
sitting.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had my first son before I got out of all of that. So, and he has, I think, been marked also. We've had some wild experiences with him, and he can see. I think I call it like discernment of spirits, but he can like see spirits, and he has these crazy. There's some weird stuff with dreams with him. We can talk about that.
Please,
I would
let's
love
go.
to.
Let's
Okay.
go.
So after I became a Christian, and my son was already born. He was probably over between 1 and 2, and I was having this dream where a demon, a female bird demon, Lilith, I assume, had like her claws in my head, and she was like trying to like rip my head. And all of a sudden, my son's head appears in the dream. And he's like glowing just his head. And he goes, no. And I wake up and he is laying on top of me and like shielding me. And that has never happened before. He does not, I've never woken up with him like that. And he, dude, he totally saved me in that instance from a demonic attack.
That's
And
incredible.
yeah.
You
And
said when he appeared, he was glowing.
his
It was
head,
just his head.
just his head, like he poked his head into the dream.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, it was super weird. And so I don't normally have dreams. Before I found out I was pregnant with him, I started having dreams that I was pregnant with a boy and I was giving birth to a son. And like, I don't have dreams. And I don't know if that's because he was inside of me or what, but like, so after all of that happened, he became very ill. He got like strep throat and a staph infection, and we were in the hospital for 30 days, and he had all of these surgeries, and he has like all of these like scars on him. And like, I personally think it's because he's marked, and the enemy, whatever, was trying to like take him out, is my personal opinion. But anyway, he survived that. And he now, every once in a while, he'll have these crazy dreams. And it's very interesting.
What sorts of dreams?
Okay, so for example, just recently, he'll have like, we've started praying like the armor of God and for like a shield around the house, and he will have these dreams where like hordes of bees are like trying to like break in, and yeah, and then so that was the most recent dream. But okay, so my pastor knows my testimony, right? I promise this is getting back into the dream. So my pastor knows my testimony, and we go to like a Baptist-ish church. So whenever I'm his official like demon person, so whenever there's somebody who is afflicted, he'll send them my way, right? So I have had demonic experiences, but I didn't know what I was doing really when he first started sending me people. And there's one person in particular. So I went and prayed over this person's house without their permission, and something attached to me. And so it knew where to find me, right? So this girl reaches out to me again for help with getting rid of this demon. And as I'm telling her what to do, a demon like comes and tries to attach to me, but it can't. So it attaches to my son, the one who has all of these dreams. And that night, he dreamt that he was being tortured, and like all of like this weird stuff that he's like never been exposed to. And I was able to cast it out of him, and he came to know the Lord. But he just will have I don't know if they're like prophetic dreams or y'all, I'm sorry, I'm like getting lost in my words.
No, that's all right.
No,
Don't worry
it's-
about it. I know it's a difficult thing to try to explain as well.
Because it's like one story leads into the next. This is how my brain works too. So go ahead, do what you got to do.
It all
I'm
bleeds
following.
into it.
If we have questions, we're gonna stop you and be like, "What did you just say?" Like,
Well, here, while the reason that I asked what sort of dreams is because my son has had his fair share of strange experiences. He's 9 years old now, and mostly these things don't happen anymore. Although in the past, he has told me a story about this when he was really little. He was probably like 3 years old, that he was in bed, and it felt as though his body was tied down to the bed with belts. And he saw a man pacing back and forth in the hallway, black hat, black duster coat. So at 3 years old, he's explaining the Hat Man to me. I still remember, and it's weird because you try not to, as a parent, feed into it.
Yeah.
Because, really, and I was just saying this on another show, for a good night's sleep, you know what I mean? Like, obviously there's other very important reasons, but if you like to be able to sleep at night as a parent, you don't feed into these things. And I remember one day he came to me and he starts telling me about a dream that he had. And whenever my son talks about dreams, I don't like feed in actively, but I do I'll tune in and I'll listen, and I won't make it a big deal, but I'm listening.
Yeah.
And he starts telling me about a dog, a black dog with red eyes that could talk. And I said, I don't like that, but all right. And he's saying that the dog is like his friend. So he's a good guy in the dream. And then he comes to me only about a week later, and he's describing his dreams, and it's the same dog again. And at that, I said, well, next time you see that dog, tell it in the name of Jesus Christ to leave you alone. Don't speak to you anymore. Don't come to your dreams. Don't contact me. In the name of Jesus Christ, you have to go away. Yeah. And I think he's described that dog to me maybe a total of 3 times. And according to him, he's 9 years old, so who the hell knows? And I don't even want to necessarily tell my son that, by the way. I don't want to say, hey, 9-year-old. Well, he was like maybe 8 at the time, 7. Engage in spiritual warfare. You know what I mean? Because you start to feed,
why not?
If you feed into that, it becomes, well, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because I do believe something is definitively happening, but also the imagination of a child can take it to a point where who knows? Then it's this recurring thing, and he's in this realm where he's constantly coming back to me, telling me about casting out demons, and
Okay.
so
I have something
go
to
ahead.
say.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So my son is 5,
Mhm.
and we've had, because of where I came from, my family has opened doors to spiritual attack, spiritual warfare, more so than the average person. And we will all experience paranormal activity occasionally.
Mhm.
And my son, so I described about how this demon came and attached to us, and it attached to my son, and it was torturing him in his dreams. And I started seeing, this happened over a course of 3 days. I started seeing this shadow person walking around, and I didn't say anything to my son about what had happened, and he started seeing it too. And he was like, "Mom, there was a man walking through our bedroom." And so the first night he had the dream where a girl was like electrocuting him and torturing him. And then the second night, it was this crazy sexual stuff that he had no words for. He just was describing it to me. And I was like, what do I do?
Horrifying.
And yes, horrifying. And
Horrifying.
he's the sweetest, kindest little boy. He was angry. Whenever we would try and pray or talk about Jesus, he would get upset. And he was like growling and stuff, like something had very clearly attached to him. And finally, after the second night where he had the sexual dreams, I sat him down and I was like, okay, listen. My best friend is also she used to be in my coven. She's now a Christian also. So we communicate about all of this stuff. And she was like, what about unforgiveness? I'm reading that unforgiveness is a big window, like an open window in the spirit realm. So I was like, okay, listen, buddy, you got to forgive your little brother. My younger son is 2, and he is a terrorist. And he
Can relate.
is a terrorist. So he is constantly terrorizing my older son. And so I was like, do you forgive your little brother? Like, do you love him? And I explained to him that like unforgiveness and sin leaves us vulnerable to spirits. And I was straight up like, I think a spirit has attached to you. And he was like, I forgive my little brother. I love my little brother. And I was able to cast it out of him after that. And he said that he felt the bad kingdom leave him.
Interesting.
And yes. And then he was singing and happy. And we walked through the whole house and cleared it out by, you take authority over your home and you cast demons out because we have authority to step over them. And cast them out in Jesus' name.
Now, what did you? The chat is going crazy with what you just went. You went to somebody's house and you started casting a demon out of someone else's house without their consent.
Yes, I did. I didn't know.
You're a wild girl. Okay, tell
Is
me
that
about
the
that.
issue though? Then the
I
issue
didn't
becomes the
know.
lack of consent.
I would never do that again. I would never ever do that again. But I did do that. I was asking for it.
I could see how you would think that's a good idea, right? I mean,
yeah, if you don't know.
Otherwise, it's until you start to realize that the spiritual realm is everything hinges on
Legal.
consent.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, and technically it hinges on ownership. So you have no
Right.
ownership there, even though they have no right to be there. Yeah, they're like, get out of here.
I had a very
face.
similar situation though. I'm not going to hash out the whole story, but when I moved into a new house, I went through some strange stuff for a while until I realized like I am the new owner of this home and I have to take authority over it and tell these things to leave in the name of Christ because they have no authority here. I am the one who owns this property. And I think, it's all legalese. It's all consent.
Yep.
You said something that prompted a question in my mind here. You're talking about how somebody from your coven is now a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that, your coven, the people that you actually met up with in real life. What did you guys do together? And also where I imagine these people become fast friends. So then what are their opinions when you stop showing up for your weekly witch meeting?
I mean, it was so the coven was in high school and we remained friends like through our 20s. And obviously I'm still good friends. I'm in my 30s now and she's my best friend.
Mm.
But we would do some minor spells and like promise each other to each other and like we're going to be friends forever, and we felt like the universe was like butterflies would like fly in and like land on us and stuff like when we were doing these things. So we took that to mean we're in the right track, we're doing the right thing, we're one with Mother Nature and all of that stuff. And and we did it was mostly like studying and like palm reading and, all the cheesy, typical, like new age, occulty.
Ouija boards?
No, we never did a Ouija board, but we did do tarot cards.
Mm.
We did do the tarot cards. And we believed in reincarnation. And like, I believed I had committed suicide in a previous life. And I had a lot of suicidal predications. And I struggled with self-harm, and so did my friends in the coven, which we didn't know that until later on in life when we like talked about it with one another. Like we all were experiencing self-harm. So she became a Christian first, and she admitted to me that she was a conservative, and I was still up to my eyeballs in the occult and was like shocked because I had blue hair and facial piercings. And I could not believe that my best friend was a conservative. And then when she became a Christian, I was like, what? Who are you? I don't even know who you are. But because of our history, I did not like flip out at her. But I think that is like was a seed that helped to lead me out of that path too. So
what was her experience that drove her? Because I imagine she had to explain this to you. What had her back away and become, a conservative and a Christian?
I'm not sure about the conservative part, but her mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she began going to church. The mother began going to church, and she survived the cancer. And my friend had done all of this praying, and I think she saw, I forget the specifics, but she saw some sort of like confirmation from God that he was real and present, and that her mother was going to be healed, and she was healed. So she needs to get up on the internet and share her testimony. So when she watches this, like, you need to get on and share your testimony. So
we'd be very interested in talking to her. Oftentimes it's a personal experience that causes somebody to pivot in that way. Yeah. And, based off of what you're describing here, that fits that bill. When you were immersed in this and you were convinced that there were spiritual entities and various ways that you could affect things on the spiritual realm, did you have an outlook of good and evil, or were these things not so cut and dry in your mind and there was no greater good and greater evil?
I thought everything was gray. It was all shades of gray. I didn't believe in I felt there was no true evil, there was no true good. So like even in terms of like the Holocaust, like I felt like, well, these people, we don't know like these people's like lived experience and how we don't know what like drove them. Anyway, it is not real, but I thought everything was gray. So
that's
I didn't
interesting because
or anything. So yeah,
as I feel like I turned this corner one day in my perception of the world, where I very much thought that there was a much greater gray area in all matters. And as I got older, I realized that gray area is a place that you can get stuck in and become indecisive and a bit of a fence sitter. And in all matters, cultural, political, and spiritual, I think the middle is almost just as bad as the bad side. You know what I mean? So we're perceiving everything as mostly gray, and there is no greater good or evil. There is, in fact, a greater good and evil, and you're either on the side of good, or really it's just all the bad side, because these entities, if they can't get you to adhere to them, they just certainly don't want you to adhere to God. So they'll take even sitting in the middle.
Yeah. I agree. I saw everything as gray back then, and now, like you said, the older that I get and the more experience I have, there's everything, it's black or white. You know what I mean? When you're sitting in the middle, it's like there's you're still in the shadow. I think there's the shadow still has like its control on you. And I think you can get closer and closer to the good, but if you're in a gray area, this shadow just has its claws in you and you just don't realize it. Like in the Bible, it says that if you're not hot or cold, like if you're lukewarm, he's going to spit you out. So
This episode is brought to you by landofbiltong.com. Biltong is a traditional form of dried, cured meat which originated from southern African countries. And at Anton's Land of Biltong, they use premium cuts of Angus and Wagyu beef. They handcraft their own spice blends and slowly dry age their meats to give you biltong with a unique and satisfying flavor. Unlike popular brands of beef jerky that are filled with preservatives and chemicals, food colorings, and sugars, Anton's Biltong is made with natural ingredients. When I'm doing diets like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, I can just reach over and grab a bag of Anton's Biltong, and there's no harm done. I'm able to snack and not feel guilty about it. I genuinely love Anton's Biltong. In fact, in between shows when we're doing a double day and I don't have time to cook for myself, I just walk over to the kitchen real quick, grab a bag, and chow down. Listeners of this show can go to landofbiltong.com and use promo code Nephilim to get 10% off all of their orders. Anton's Biltong plus landofbiltong.com is currently offering free shipping on any orders over $49.95. That's promo code Nephilim to receive 10% off your entire order from landofbiltong.com. Biltong is not just food, but a way of life.
I think that it's very true.
And what's interesting is there's almost a feeling of altruism where, or at least like somehow immersing yourself in the nuance is somehow seen as a good thing.
Yeah.
And I do think there is something to be said about somebody who can see that there are finer details to a topic, but I think what is significantly greater is someone who is able to galvanize themselves. Almost even to one side or the other. I said it yesterday when it was like we were talking about softer versions of Satanism, and there are those who are doing it as a LARP and an affront to Christianity and an affront to conservatism and things like that, and they don't really believe in this on a spiritual level. And I do think that is almost worse than somebody who is convicted and says these entities are real and I seek to serve them. Obviously, that's terrible, but there is something bad about a lack of conviction. And then also to dedicate yourself to something that you don't even believe is real. Dedicating, a disproportionate amount of time to an act or a joke, or, sticking your nose up at another organization instead of pursuing something that you're passionate about is wild. I wanted to get back to this bird monster. And we've kind of danced around this idea that this is likely Lilith, because Lilith is described as the night monster. It's described as this harpy. It kind of sounds like you saw this more than twice. Is that the case? Have you seen this a lot?
So I said, I had those reoccurring dreams, and then I had a fear of birds for just this random fear of birds for years. And I don't know, I guess when I became a Christian, that went away, but I didn't recognize it until recently. And yeah, I've only seen it a few times. And then, like I said, the dream, that was a bird woman. Like she had a female face, and then there were like these feathers and like bird claws and like, but yeah. So, I mean, I didn't see, there were like owls and things that would like hang around my house and like scream, like screech owls.
Mm.
And
I'm
that
sure you've
sort of
come
thing.
across it in your research that these things are correlated.
Yes. And yeah, so I haven't, but ever since like that dream where like my son like stuck his head in, I have not had any more like encounters with her or it or whatever. And I don't have a fear of birds anymore. So I don't know if like God delivered me at that point. I was an early Christian. When I first became a Christian, I still had a ton of new age beliefs and like, you know, I believed in like Christ consciousness and all of that
Right.
stuff. So I don't know.
Sometimes I
How-
think that God sends us people. My wife, the same way your son poked his head into a dream, my wife had the uncanny ability to wake me up from sleep paralysis when I used to be plagued by it. And I mean, that was like, I already really liked her, but
Yeah.
that helped a
He's
lot.
saving you.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you know what it's like. It's like if you're in sleep paralysis, the feeling of dread and despair is so intense, and to be it very much feels like you're rescued from that when somebody wakes
Yeah.
you up from it. So
You're like screaming for somebody to come and wake you up.
right,
Like, help me. And everyone's just like,
yeah, and so I always got the feeling that you know, there's more than one reason why God will send a person to you, but when people that are so close to you also have that sort of a function, you know, who's closer to you than your son, and then add another layer on it, he has the ability to pop his glowing head into your dream realm and cast out Lilith or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, that's pretty handy.
yeah, I agree. So just thinking about that, whenever there's like a spirit that is trying to attach to me, I'll hear a ringing, like a super loud, like a ring, like sort of like tinnitus, but it's like it's a short time, you know? So the first time it happened to me was when I prayed over that girl's house without her permission. I like heard that ringing, and then later on that night, I thought that something was going to happen. The first time that happened, like when I prayed, and later on that night, my son, the one with the dreams, I have 3 children, so the one with the dreams had I was standing in my bedroom and he was in the living room, and he started yelling like, who's there? So I came running in, and he said that somebody had clapped right in front of his face.
Woo.
And then he was like, is it possible for angels to be evil, is what he said to me. And I was like, oh,
That's an upsetting question.
yes.
It's like, actually, yeah, that's how Genesis 6.
Yeah.
Man, that's a very unsettling question though.
Yeah, I had never brought that up to him before. He came to that conclusion on his own. But I say that the ringing for me was like, oh, maybe that means that there's a spirit trying to attach to me. So I've had it happen numerous times since then. And the night when the spirit attached to my son and was like in him and like torturing him, I heard it then too. Well, my husband is a Freemason, and I have been praying for discernment, like for God to give my husband discernment, help him to, if the root of Freemasonry is evil, help him to see it. Because as his wife, I can't say like, you're not allowed to do this. You know what I mean? Like he is the head of our home. I don't want him to like resent me or feel controlled or whatever. So I've been praying. Yeah. So he had put up this big Freemason poster with like all of these symbols all over it in our closet, we have a large closet with like a chair and stuff. So that's where he would sit and do his thinking or scrolling or whatever. So I had been praying for discernment for him. And one morning recently, all of a sudden, he starts hearing this ringing. And he's like, my ear's ringing. And I run up to him and I'm like, I bind you, spirit, in the name of Jesus. And it stopped. He was like, And he used to have seizures as a kid, and he said he would hear the ringing before he would have seizures, and they couldn't. He had like scans done, and they couldn't identify a cause for the seizures, right? So he heard the ringing, and I ran up and I bound it, and I was like, I cast you out, devil, like come out, like that kind of stuff. And he was like, what is happening right now? But it stopped. It stopped. And then he was like freaked out. And this happened right in front of the poster. And I was like, can we get rid of the poster? And he said yes. And he
What's
didn't
on the poster?
It's a bunch of Freemasons. So it was like the history of Freemasons and like a line, and it had like all the different branches of Freemasonry. There's tons of them, and like history and symbols, and yeah. So
Is he still in it?
yeah, and he hasn't. I don't know if he's been to a session since that happened. So I don't know. We'll see. Be praying
I
for him.
wonder when it comes to the ringing. That's actually very fascinating to me because
everybody, we're about to drink. Everyone's about to drink.
No. I'm not going that way. I was just going to say it's something that happens to, I would imagine, everybody. And it certainly happens to me. And when it does happen to me, I feel the overwhelming urge that I should be paying attention to something specific at that moment. Although I never can lock into whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if there's a significance to that, because there are certain things that happen in the human experience that everybody experiences, but we give very little credence to. For example, deja vu is a fascinating one in the sense that everybody experiences it, but there's simply nothing to be said about it. And what's even more wild is you can kind of call it like a feeling or a sensation. People have sensations that everybody understands. I'm hungry. That means you got to eat something. Or I'm sad. It's because something sad happened. It's weird that we all have this conjoined sensation of, well, it feels like time itself is repeating.
Yeah.
I've lived this moment before to some extent, and it's still going. It's still going. And then all of a sudden it ends and you're like, yeah, it's done now, but it was going on for like 45 seconds. And
a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah. And it's just strange because everybody has that feeling, but there's no information to derive from the experience. So there's no discussion to be had. So even though we all know what it feels like to have time repeating on some sort of strange loop, there's nothing to be said about it. And so I just find that insane that you know what that feeling is. And it's the same way with the ringing in the ears. There's so much folklore built around it. It's like, well, when your ears are ringing, someone's talking about you.
Ah, yep.
And even that is like, oh, so you think this is significant too, right? Like that's the real takeaway from it, in my opinion, is like, oh, people have always thought that this is significant, but there's a bunch of different reasons for it. And so when you say that how would you describe it? What is your interpretation when your ears start ringing? That is your cue to look for what?
I think it's like a spiritual alarm, essentially. Like I don't know if it's the spirit or your body is like feeling something happening in the spirit realm. And my opinion is like our consciousness is like out here, and our brains are like a filter for our consciousness. And I think that entities are able to come into us through whatever is happening out here in the spirit realm. So I think we're spiritual beings in a material body, right? So I think that when the ringing is happening, there is a demon attempting to infiltrate you.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Well, it makes a lot of sense with the COVID stuff, right? Where you have to stay 6 feet away. There's something about that like toroidal field. Have you ever seen that donut around you? I believe that too. You can tell when someone, just another physical being, is close to you. You don't have to see them. You just kind of like feel them. There's like a weird magnetic charge. So I don't doubt that happens with the spiritual realm. But I was getting at the we should all drink because I thought you were going to Jerry Marzinski with the noise. Licensed psychotherapist in the field for 35 years. Yada yada yada. We tell this story 1,000 times. But one of his stories where he's sitting at his desk and he's talking to a patient, and he hears a crackling noise that travels across his wall behind his head and into a garbage can. And it turns out that crackling noise wasn't some kind of entity that was talking to his patient, telling him to kill him right then and there. And he heard it. He perceived it as like a TV static, which actually goes back to your TV static, man. It's like like this crackling TV static noise that's traveling across the wall. So these things are here, but we're perceiving them as frequency or vibration, which is
right. And the same thing will happen in sleep paralysis. Associated with the phenomenon, there is this everybody drink. Associated with this phenomenon of sleep paralysis is this intense, some people will describe it as a vibration. It's like a buzzing. I've felt it as what felt like, I've never been tasered, but it seemed like a taser, almost like I had been electrocuted. There was current running through my body. It was so powerful that it was audible, but also I could feel it in my bones. So I didn't even have to hear it, because I think if something, they have those headphones, you could put them on. They don't even go in your ears. They rest on your skull, and you could still hear clear as day, even though this is resonating through your skull instead of through your eardrums.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't even have had to have audibly heard it. I still would have gotten that sensation either way, because it just felt like I was being electrocuted. So my body stiffens up, and the emotion, by the way, that's associated with this type of frequency is dread. And when I say that, I mean, I know this is old hat sleep paralysis, which is almost, I feel bad in this realm that we're in, where we're discussing conspiracy and spirituality. Nobody wants to hear about sleep paralysis anymore. It's kind of this old thing, right?
I think it's cool. It's interesting.
I mean, I think it's fascinating, but it evokes this feeling of dread, unlike any other experience. It's unnatural. It doesn't even feel like it's your dread. It feels like it's been given to you, like you're the recipient of this feeling instead of it being generated from within. And it's a doozy. So it's like whatever's going on, there's the minor version, it seems like, where you can get that frequency, but it's an audible one. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's an alarm sounding off. And then if you dial that all the way up, it's like somehow your spirit is in danger. And that's accompanied with a physical sensation, an audible sensation, this intense buzzing and vibration. And, it all seems to be the same thing, just dialed down or up.
I didn't even make that connection, but I think that's I think that's exactly right. I have not made that connection. The same thing happens to me. And like, I used to astral project, and you sort of use sleep paralysis and like that state to, it's like you're switching channels. So you have to like, sort of ride the wave, like, as like your frequencies change. With like the buzzing, you can like send yourself out of your body. So it's literally like that on a smaller scale. That is, I think, wow, that's profound.
Well, okay, because we're going into something that is endlessly fascinating to both Top and I. I think we don't talk about it, but I do believe every time somebody mentions astral projection, me and Top, we both kind of like, go on, please.
What did you say you do?
Go on. This experience, how does it get on your radar? How did you end up practicing it? What are some of the results that it's yielded?
Okay, so as a kid, when a trick that I would have when I was falling asleep, I would know that I was almost asleep because I could see through my eyelids. And I was like, okay, I'm almost asleep because I could see through my eyelids. And then as an adult, I heard about astral projection, and I was like, that's stupid. And then I read on the CIA website, Project Stargate, and how the CIA has confirmed that essentially astral projection is a real phenomenon. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So I started reading about people's experiences and how seeing through your eyelids is one of the ways like you've done it, or one of the ways like it can seem like because you are awake, but it's also not reality. So sometimes you can think, am I dreaming? Am I really awake? Like, what is that? Like, especially if you don't know about astral projection. Like, have you ever had an alarm go off, like when you were a kid, and you would get up and get ready, and then you would wake up again, and you would realize you had never done anything?
Yeah.
That's essentially some people say that like that's astral projecting, is like you were astral projecting, but you didn't realize it. And you would just like go about your day and then you would wake up again. Or so I had that happen all the time, right? So I forget exactly how I discovered about it, but I learned how to do it. There's many different methods you can use, but the one I would use was intentionally triggering sleep paralysis, and then using the vibrations to essentially like eject yourself like into the spirit realm or the astral realm.
So when you say that you can see through your eyelids, you're seeing your room still, right? Like, in other
Yes.
words, you're drifting off to sleep, but suddenly you're able to see your room again.
Yep.
But
And
then
the vibrations you're describing are like when you're, because when I have sleep paralysis, it feels like I am being like just like violent. It's uncomfortable. It's like
Yep.
electrocuted. Okay, so you're actually using that to slip.
Right.
What
So
the fuck?
that's
the-
interesting
your
because
brain-
I hate that state of being. Like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to hang out
But-
there at all.
I tell
You
the
can-
story all the time. Sorry, go ahead.
So your brain waves shift when you enter into sleep mode. When your body goes into sleep, your brain waves become larger and deeper, and your brain is always sending out waves, but we can't feel them because they're so like high pitched, so fast. Like it's just we don't perceive it. But in sleep paralysis, you're feeling your brain waves, and they go throughout. Like you said, there's a whole field around you full of waves that you are emitting. And so with sleep paralysis, you're feeling your sleep cycle brain waves. I forget what they're called.
Like
but
theta.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So when you want to astral project, you, instead of fighting those waves, you lean into them.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you'll be able to sit up. There's different ways to leave your body. But when you're in sleep paralysis, instead of like screaming and like trying so hard, like just lean into it, and then you can like eventually roll out. I would do the rollout method, but there's different ways.
I would do the
This is what I said. I tell you guys all the time when like I'll watch the Yankee game, watching Michael Kay sitting in my uncle's living room. Same sort of thing. I suppose it's like a paralysis, because it's an uncomfortable. There's an uncomfortable like feeling. I can audibly hear it. My hearing is zoomed in on Michael Kay talking, but there's like a weird vibration around me, and then I'll just be out of my body. But like I'd never go far. I'm like in the corner of the room watching myself and my uncle and my dad watch TV, and I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Wow.
Hated it.
Yeah.
But it always happened. Like I said, it always happened watching the Yankees in this one place. Like the conditions in this place were correct for that to happen. Maybe the type of TV that it was coming through, I don't know, but it's not something that I like to do.
Sometimes I think as a child, you kind of create the conditions too. So if there's a familiar aspect to this, it almost falls into the realm of like ritual. So here I am again in the same environment with the same people, watching the same thing in the same state of mind. And I think that sometimes that's enough to put us in a form of autopilot, and it allows our consciousness to do something else because we've been here so many times. This is a well-worked groove. So I used to have a similar thing where I'd be watching the TV at night, same thing, sitting on I slept on like a futon as a kid. And I'd be on the futon, I'd be watching the show. It's, the same time at night. And I would always go through the same sensation where I would get like tunnel vision, and the room would seem incredibly stretched out, and the TV would get really small and far away feeling. And then all that kind of weird stuff would start happening. So sometimes I think, just because you mentioned, is it the type of TV or something? I think even that probably, yeah, like those old tube TVs in particular, I think they probably have a certain way because they are often tied into this experience, going back to that description of static, like that static sensation when you first turn a tube TV on and it changes the vibe of the room. You can tell when it gets turned off and electrical buzzing stops and the atmosphere changes.
Well,
I
yeah,
bet you
there's
it's a lot
even
of different elements.
like with the guitar, people will kill you over solid state amps versus tube amps, which are solid state is just like computer chips and stuff sounds really good. So you guys wouldn't be able to tell, but if you're like an experienced guitar player and you have a tube amplifier, a modern day solid state amplifier could replicate the exact sound and tone and all that stuff that you're going to get. So you'll sound like Carlos Santana, but if you're actually playing through his stack with the tube amplifier, with like a Marshall stack, whatever he's playing, there's a different feeling to it. There's a different tonality like on you, and you're keenly aware of that. Whereas, so there is something to that technology, and like it's being played with. There's a replication of it.
And you're changing the atmosphere of the area that you're in, which I think is certainly it's going to have its sort of implications when it comes to this thing, if these things are all based off of frequency and harmonics. But I wanted to ask you, when you're doing this, what's kept me from doing this is the overwhelming feeling that something in the room was, something was there and it was negative.
Yeah.
And I think that played a pretty great role in me resisting this at all costs and trying to get back to a normal state.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm asking you was, did you not have that sensation? Was your feeling of slipping into sleep paralysis something that was much more neutrally emotionally charged? Because for me, it was supremely negatively emotionally charged. And I didn't want to hang out in whatever state of existence this was any longer.
It was always negative until I wanted to do the astral projection. So right. So I would always feel attacked, and I always assumed that there was some sort of like paranormal aspect to anytime I would have like a sleep paralysis attack. But with the astral projection, it wasn't like that. Like it wasn't terrifying. And I mean, but I also really wanted to do it. And I would sort of like pray to my higher self to help me in getting out of my body. So I don't know.
Interesting. Do you think that were you praying to some aspect of yourself, or was something else standing in that position pretending to be
I think
you?
there was something exterior helping me out, because I had more success when I would do that, like pray to my higher self to help me get out versus not. And I don't know. I think undeniably there are spiritual aspects to it, So I never saw anything particularly terrifying. I did have a couple of encounters with like entities, but I pretty quickly after learning how to astral project and like figuring out how to do it, I became a Christian. And then I started we had like these demonic attacks and stuff, and like so I sort of dropped off of that. And now whenever sleep paralysis starts to happen, I know what it is that's happening. So, and just like saying Jesus or praying is like releases me from it. So I think that astral projection, I mean, it's fun. It's exciting getting to like go into the astral realm, but I think it leaves you very vulnerable. And like I've spoken to people where something like they felt like something rode back in with them, and then now they have another presence like that is in their body. And I think most people have like spirits attached to them, but they don't recognize that. They don't feel that they're there. They're not like constantly being tormented. So but in this case with this person, they could feel that there was an entity with them after doing it. And so, like you can supposedly, if you run into a low vibration being, AKA a demon, that you can send love or positive energy at it, and it's supposed to like make it go away. But I mean, I just think that's a load of BS.
Today's episode is brought to you by PurgeStore.com. What if I told you that more people have died from parasites than have ever died from war? What if I told you that diseases like cancer, multiple sclerosis, acne rosacea, and rheumatoid arthritis can all be treated with parasite medication? Rid your body of these all too common parasites by using Purge Parasite Cleanse. Purge Parasite Cleanse is made with ingredients like zinc, carrot powder, garlic, black walnut. These are all natural ingredients that keep you safe while killing the parasites. And while you're on PurgeStore.com, try out their Digestimes to promote healthy gut bacteria and aid in digestion. These, as well as any other products on PurgeStore.com, can be purchased with a promo code Nephilim, NEPHILIM, will save you 15% off of your entire purchase at PurgeStore.com.
So,
Does this resonate with you? I think that God answers prayers when they're mailed to the right address, meaning you definitively know who you're praying to, and that other things will half-ass answer prayers, always with some terrible strings attached. And they don't really care about the mailing address. They don't care if it's specific, meaning like if you pray to something and it gets generally close enough to a Lilith.
You pray to the universe.
Great example, Top. Yes, you pray to the universe. Well, then something's going to pick that up and they're going to run with it and they're going to show you something that seems promising to get you on the line. But when it comes to God, you've got to be very specific. I do believe he answers prayers, but it can't be the universe, whoever that, some amorphous thing. Do you think that?
I agree 100%. Like, absolutely. And God does answer prayers, sometimes very quickly. Like, I'll be praying for, like, I feel like deliverance has been placed on my heart and that God wants me to move toward, like, to try and help set people free who are in bondage, like I was in bondage. And I feel like God has placed that on my heart. So, like, recently I was praying, Lord, please let me see deliverance. Please help me. Please use me for deliverance. And literally the next morning, I had a friend who is under spiritual attack call me and say, I need to come over. I need prayer. I need help. Like, that happened like literally within like 10 hours of me praying that. And so things like that will happen. Like, God will let you know, or he lets me know at least that he is listening. And I don't know, some weird stuff like that will happen sometimes.
I agree. I've always been cautious in my prayers in that I do think they have to pass through a filter. It's like, are you praying for something frivolous?
Yeah.
Because I think that's foolish, right? So I've never been the type to pray for that sort of thing. But I try to make sure that my prayers are two things of a spiritual nature and first and foremost in alignment with God's will. So in other words, if I'm praying for something that's just not in the cards for me or for somebody else, it's not part of God's plan, then so be it. But it has to fundamentally be part of God's, greater will. I mean, can we talk a little bit then about, I know you said you had some altercations or some run-ins with some entities, and the way that you said that made it sound like there's not too much to unpack there, that these were maybe cursory interactions, but I would be interested in hearing them. It's like when you're astral projecting rather, where are you going? And even if these things were small, these interactions to you, what were they like?
So I wanted to go to like Stonehenge and see the hinges in Scotland also. And like, I've never been to Europe, so I wanted to travel to Europe and see, all of the different hinges, and like the stone, like where ancient people placed all of these massive stones. And so I would go there. And also I like astral projected to this place in Scotland. And like my heritage is Scottish and Swedish. That's primarily, and a little bit of German. But so I was very interested in like the Scottish side, and so I came to this place, and they used to have, they would like put, way back in the day, they would like use the ground as like a part of like their structure, and they would like dig into the ground and then also have like put like grass and like turf and stuff like on top of their buildings. So it was like this, I felt like I had time traveled, and I went back and was like seeing these structures, how they would have been. And there was a dog entity there that was sort of like a guardian of sorts. And yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
No. This is, you're
It's like
touching on something
alternate
that
realities.
seems to kind of peek its head out very often.
Yeah,
This element of the dog in particular.
yeah,
Obviously, if you're a fan of Tony Merkel's, you're familiar with the concept of dog man.
yep,
There's certainly the concept of hellhounds.
yeah,
And
Even
Anubis.
right. So these dog-headed deities. And then of course going back to what I was talking about with my son, this dog entity with red eyes that spoke English. It's interesting because dogs do seem to have some place in the hierarchy in the spiritual realm,
yeah,
whether or not they're humanoid or even just like a quadrupedal, a four-legged dog.
yeah.
Um,
Quadruped.
doesn't always have to be a dude walking around with a dog head. I just think that's strange. Is it ever daytime when you're astral projecting?
Uh, yes, I have.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so this time that I'm describing was in the daytime. I was at home and it was daytime, but anyway, in this realm it was daytime.
Okay.
Yeah, and this being was like a guardian of sorts, a guardian of this area or like the timeline or something.
Did
He
it
was
feel
some sort of
negative?
guardian. Yes, it was negative.
Oh,
Yeah, it is, I got like a male impression, but he like essentially chased me out of it. Um, yeah, and so I fled that area. But
the immediate area of Stonehenge. You're saying this thing
no,
seemed
so this was, I felt like I had gone back in time, or it was like some sort of alternative timeline, and it was like someplace in Scotland, and it was like how they used to have like ancient like Stone Age time, like how they would have their houses,
Mhm.
and they would like use them, put them like into the ground. It was sort of like a hobbitish, like Hobbiton
like a shire.
Shire-esque. Yeah, kind of a lot more like stone. Um, but so that's like what it looked like. And then this being was guarding that area. Like I wasn't expecting him, and he just like appeared and was surprised and angry and wanted me to leave. So
Do you get the feeling that you were in a different time,
yeah.
or maybe could you have been in a different realm or aspect of a physical location in our reality? Because oftentimes you hear the concept of this upside down,
Yeah.
and sometimes there are enough irregularities within the upside down that you may have like different structures where like
Yeah.
generally it's the same geographical location, but sometimes there's enough variation where it's like that building didn't exist here but it does
Yeah.
there, kind of a
That's
deal.
very much how it is. Like when you astral project, it'll look the same, but in essence, but there will be differences. Like a house that has never had a fireplace will have a fireplace, for
Hmm.
example. Or there'll be like extra buildings, or things will be different colors, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like there is like in the spirit world, there is like a whole society like thing. It looks like here, but just a little like different how they want it to be. But like there's like a whole society, like a whole thing, whole existence going on all around us that we just have no idea about.
What is it? I've
And
I've heard it described as it almost looks like it functions like another society.
yeah,
And then that makes me wonder about the function of the entities, beings, people, whatever that inhabit that realm. What is their lot in all of this? Are they aware of them being in a realm that's parallel to ours? Are they aware of our realm?
Are they aware that they were born fucked up?
Are they
don't
aware
know.
that we really don't like it when they show up?
Yeah. Well, it's so weird. I think some of them intentionally hate us and don't want good for us, and they like to terrorize us. And then I don't think it's all demons, like because demons want to be like in your body sinning. They enjoy sinning, they desire it, they need it. So when they jump in when they're with us and pushing us to do various things, like I feel like they are receiving like the joy, the pleasure of whatever sin you have, like lust or whatever. And like that's why they're doing it, because they're in chains of darkness, like in the spirit world, and they can't feel anything unless they're like inside a human body.
Right.
Or
But then on the
inside a
other
dog or
side of
something.
that, these people that are inhabiting this upside down
Right.
almost seem like there's some rhyme or reason, some functionality to that realm.
Right.
I've
Yeah,
even heard people
there's
describe it as if
stores.
like, yeah, or like they have a job. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's yeah. So
I don't know.
that
It's
doesn't
weird.
strike me as something that's yearning to inhabit a physical body so that it can sin, as much
Right.
as it's indicative of somebody just going through the motions of their everyday life. In fact, I've even heard it described where when you're astral projecting, they might be keyed into you being there, but are freaked out because they can't see you. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of really weird stuff about this that
Yeah. Yo,
even on this show. Go ahead.
My husband, so he talked about this on the confessionals, but he saw a group of like little people. It like they were sort of like translucent-ish, and it was at night, and they were standing next to this great tree, and it was like a circle of like little fairy dwarf people, and like him and two other people all saw the same thing, and they all were able to describe it to each other afterwards. But like what these people didn't do anything. Like these little people, like they recognized that my husband was there, and like they were like startled, and then my husband was terrified and ran away, and they all ran away.
Right.
And
if you have too much of a reductionist point of view, then where do they fit in? It's like, these aren't
Right.
angels or demons,
Right.
like
What is that?
And so
Yeah.
like I was watching the movie, the original Hellboy films, which are actually they aged really well. I went back and watched them with my son recently. And in the second movie, they delve into this realm that's inhabited by sort of goblins and various almost like Celtic mythology creatures, like fairies and such. And the way they get there is a portal that is under the London Bridge, and they have to gain access to it by like speaking to the guard or whatever. And I think that a lot of things are hidden in fantasy that rhyme with something in reality, in fictional films. And I'm not saying that the base of the London Bridge has this other realm, but what I am saying is I've heard enough testimony from people that describe things that you shouldn't see outside of the film Hellboy, or you shouldn't see outside of the film Lord of the Rings, or you shouldn't see, insert
I mean,
your but yet here people are telling these stories, and you can call them liars, but oftentimes there's patterns, if you care to look, that repeat themselves from one person's testimony to another that make you go, either everybody's lying or people are running into something that seemingly mirrors what we call, fantasy Hollywood films. And, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Narnia. I've heard stories like that multiple times. I've seen, I know this is going to sound, I've seen videos where people all of a sudden came into contact with something that looked like a garden gnome. And all I can tell you is like, hey, it's just videos you see on the internet. But of the ones that I've seen, the people are so horrified that they react like somebody who's genuinely afraid of a mouse. You ever see people like they get on a table and they're screaming, and it's like, why are you so disproportionately afraid of this mouse? Well, some people have
sounds
that.
come out of me that I just
Okay. So you'll know that is a hard thing to fake.
Yeah.
That's a very, when you see something that, you're up on a chair and you're screaming. Well, I've seen people do that to things that look like gnomes. And And then I've heard stories of people seeing gnomes. What business is there in this realm that we inhabit for tiny people with red pointy hats? But
Yeah.
I've heard that story a lot, more than I should have heard it for something that doesn't exist. So I am a Christian and I believe in Jesus Christ, but I also sometimes wonder, like, did the Bible just not bother to talk about the gnomes because it wasn't important necessarily to what the Bible was trying to get across? Because the Bible tells you something very specific, and there's so much that is under the sun that isn't in the Bible, but we know is real, right? Like, I don't know if the Bible's talking about chimpanzees, but we know that chimpanzees are real. So
Right.
I just wonder if that wasn't a component that made it, because that's not what this is about. That's out
Yeah.
there, but this is telling you something very specific, but that is out there.
I think it's a non-salvation issue. And so it isn't. So I believe in Jesus. I know for a fact that I am a Christian. I love the Lord. I love Jesus. I believe that he died for our sins and rose again. And like he gives us authority to trample over serpents. I believe that 100%. But I do think that there is much more to the spirit realm and reality than could be explained in the Bible. And I think the Jewish people of the Old Testament were set apart from the rest of the world, the rest of the world at that time. And their stories, their history is very specific to themselves, but it leaves out the rest of the world. So like there was a lot going on that isn't in the Bible. And I think that there's so much more. And I think in some ways it can be a distraction, like getting obsessed with fairies and things or whatever, or like astral projecting. All of that I feel is a distraction from what's truly important, which is Jesus and helping people. There's so many people in bondage, so many people brainwashed. So like it's just, and I think that is what's truly important, is helping them and reaching them. But I do think that there is a lot more to reality. You know what I mean? Like I think Bigfoot, fairies, the Dogman, all of that it exists. But I think that they're like extra dimensional beings. Like maybe they have the ability to cross over into our realm at like certain times or at will. I don't know. But like, yeah, either everyone is lying, which it seems impossible that every single person is lying, or there's something going on.
And I think that the really unfortunate thing about that body of information, Bigfoot, fairies, things like that, astral projection, is that because Christianity doesn't cover it in any meaningful way, when a book on witchcraft in the teenage section of Barnes and Nobles covers it, well, if you've had an experience or you've heard of an experience that just lodges itself in your brain and you just can't stop thinking about it. It's like, my friend said they saw little people with red hats, or whatever the case may be. All of a sudden, here it is in this book. Well, now this book is an authority on the topic. And that's the problem, is we get amazed by these spiritual encounters, and then we find something that addresses it, and that something then becomes our authority on the topic. And that is,
like a book on witchcraft in the teenage section of Borders, right?
right.
Yep.
Exactly. So
Yep.
we're at the hour and a half mark. I really want to get into how you become disenchanted with this, version of reality that witchcraft has offered you, and how you make this transition over into Christianity.
So I had given birth. I had decided to keep my baby. Okay. And some precursor. So I used to be addicted to opiates. I lost my whole life, fell all apart. And I was with this woman and for 7 years, and she introduced me to hard drugs, and I lost everything and was basically living out of my car and homeless. And my husband, the man who would become my husband, got me into rehab. And I figured out eventually that, so I had an abortion at 18. And like the guy that I was with pressured me to get an abortion. And like when I went, he went to like a metal show like that day and like wasn't there
Wow.
for me. And yeah. And like my mom drove me and she was a hardcore feminist. And anyway, so I started to torture myself basically. I swore off men. I considered myself a lesbian. I would like drink blackout drunk like almost daily. And I
This
was
is
a mess.
because of the trauma associated with the abortion.
Abortion,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So my husband, the man that would become my husband, got me into rehab, and I got clean for. I was probably clean for like 2 or 3 years, and was like waitressing and stuff, and then we got pregnant.
Hmm.
And we considered an abortion, and somebody at the clinic told me that when you have a baby and you decide to keep the baby, the universe will make everything work out. It will make reality work out. Things will fall into place. So I decided to keep the baby and I gave birth to him. And I while I was nursing him one day. When I was pregnant, I was 9 months pregnant. I suddenly remembered that I probably had a 401k, and we didn't know how we were going to make ends meet. We didn't know what we were going to do. He was working at some like lame job at a antique store. I was waitressing and bartending, and I was like, how are we going to do this? But then suddenly one day I remembered, hey, I have a 401k from that job that I lost due to drug addiction. And I went to go look, and it turns out that I had $75,000 in my 401k. So I was like, oh, okay.
Balling
Thanks.
out of control.
Thanks, universe. But if I had remembered that I had this 401k before I got pregnant, I would have blown it all in drugs.
Right.
I got a severance package of like $25,000, and I blew all of that in 3 months on drugs. So like I would have died, I'm sure. Like something would have happened. But anyway, it worked
Can
out.
I just say, as an aside, I've known a lot of people who have been through very similar situations to yours, and at the peak of when they would have this proclivity to abuse drugs and live a debaucherous lifestyle, they often fall into an incredible amount of money. I mean, that happens in so many. I know individuals that I can count, I think certainly exceeding one hand, who at the height of their drug use, their debaucherous lifestyle, would come into more money than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And it would come and go, and they'd blow it on all kinds of crap, and then it would just be a funny story in hindsight. And I'd go, you have nothing to show for it? They go, no, I have nothing to show for it. But I just find that funny, because you want to talk about the universe providing. Well, it seems like maybe there's even something that wants to provide you with fuel to the fire that you're burning.
Right.
I just see that a lot. I know maybe that's an outlying thing. Maybe not a lot of other people have seen that. I've seen that a lot.
I mean, I believe it. And, I think that there are like I think there's something spiritual to most things that happen in the natural. There's like a spiritual side to it now anyway. But right. So I blew all of that money, $25,000. I had literally $25,000 and I blew it all on drugs. It all disappeared. But I had a 401k that whole time. And I think that God like kept it from my memory or something. I had no idea. And then suddenly I remembered when I was 9 months pregnant and didn't know what to do, that I had $75,000. So I bribed my husband, and I was like, I will pay off the truck if you marry me. And I paid off his truck and he married me. And and we bought our house, and it made everything. And I became a stay-at-home mom. And which I never thought in a million years would ever happen. I was not one of those girls who dreamed about getting married, what my wedding was going to be like, and how many kids I was going to have. I didn't want any of that. And here I am. But anyway, so after I had my son, I was sitting there nursing him, and we didn't have a dryer, and I would hang up my husband's clothes, his work clothes, and all of a sudden I see one of the shirts, like something pinched the corner and like let go and the shirt like started swinging, and I was like, but there, like, what other explanation could there be? There was no bug. No windows were open. Like the air wasn't on. Like there was no logical explanation for what I just saw, other than perhaps a spirit of some sort. And so a lot of weird stuff started happening, and my husband was getting sleep paralysis, and he started seeing things, and I I got like a bunch of sage and like burned it, and like I was into witchcraft still at that time. And we got this spirit out, but I realized that like the demonic was real. Okay. And I was like, this was a demon. My husband saw like this tall, like lanky white thing in our home. And
A rake, huh?
A rake. It's an
Oh, that
archetype,
is-
right? It's this
I don't know.
entity. There's shadow people. There's the long, lanky,
Skinwalker
pale,
type.
skinwalker
Oh.
type, right? Yeah, these things, repeating archetypes of you know,
I didn't know
certainly
that.
these things can be broken down into categories.
That's interesting. So all that happened, right? And while all this is going on, my dad is sending me Jordan Peterson videos. And I would watch these videos looking for things to argue with, so that I could like find things to like tell my dad, like, you're an idiot, like I'm right, and this is why you need to embrace socialism. Is essentially like what I was doing. And but I started watching enough of them to where like these seeds would start getting planted, and I instead of like finding things to argue with, he like
I
made a lot
started
of
cleaning
sense.
my room.
Right. I started cleaning my room, and I started thinking about like goals and things. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands because I was a stay-at-home mom. So I consumed like all of his college courses that he at that time he had them all free on YouTube. And so in these courses, he talks about Carl Jung and shadow work. And shadow work is essentially where you go into your shadow, the things about yourself that you've like suppressed, and you incorporate those things back into your personality to become a whole person. So I was like, why not? I'll just do this. So the way you can tell what's in your shadow is by looking at other people, and like the things that really annoy you in other people are what are in your shadow. So it's like a part of like projection, like when like people project their issues onto other people. It's sort of like a similar vein. But so at that time, like I said, I was literally had blue hair. I was a blue-haired liberal. And so naturally, the thing that I thought immediately jumped to mind were like MAGA people. So in rehab, I had this guy that was in rehab with me who would wear like MAGA hats, and we would get into screaming matches, and like one of us would like leave the room or whatever. And so I hated this guy, and I was like, okay, that's the guy that pisses me off the most. So in my mind, I was like trying to sympathize with him and like I don't know, like empathize with a conservative standpoint. So I got on Google and I was trying to find conservative media. And it is so like at that time, I had no idea that about like the echo chambers. Like we literally are in echo chambers. Like I would try and find anything conservative, and all I would get was like CNN or MSNBC or Rachel Maddow, which was all the stuff I was already consuming. So that was the first time I really realized that something weird was happening, where like I couldn't find conservative viewpoints. They just were not available to me. So I did eventually find the Daily Wire, and I tried to listen to a few of their podcasts, and
You found Ben Shapiro to be insufferable?
yeah. Like, I don't know if he could speak any faster. He's just, but anyway, right. So, but I would try and listen to his podcast, and like I would get so angry at the things that they were saying, like about Obama or Hillary Clinton, that I literally could not understand what they were saying. Like I would be so mad. I couldn't hear it. So I would have to go back and like rewatch things again to like try and like push myself aside to listen. So, but in that I learned how to set aside my emotions and look logically at a situation. And before that, all I did was ride on my emotions. So my worldview started to shift at that point. And I started to get into the Joe Rogan Experience. And in his first interview with Ben Shapiro, he asks Ben like why he believes in God. And Ben Shapiro starts talking about the image of God and what that means. And he essentially says God placed man in a logical, ordered universe, and to be the image of God is to understand the universe and to be able to steward reality. And we're the only material beings that are able to do that. And he said it in like a much more eloquent way, but that's essentially what he said. And that, I don't know why God used this, but that's what he used. And it was as if he touched my forehead, the scales fell away and I saw that God was real and that I had been on the wrong path completely. And so I still didn't think Christianity was the truth. I was like, Christians are stupid. They are judgmental and smelly, and I don't like Christians. And so I was like, I'm going to read the Hebrew Bible and learn Hebrew, and maybe I'll convert to Judaism. So I did that. I started to teach myself Hebrew and read the Old Testament. And in Isaiah, it very clearly, and in Psalms, there are very clear references to Jesus, to somebody being crucified, to somebody like being killed,
resurrected.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So I hadn't been raised. My parents taught me that like there was no way to prove that Jesus existed and that faith is blind and etc. So I got online, and it's very easy to just look it up. But Jesus was a historical person, and even secular scholars, most of them agree that Jesus was a real person that walked the earth. And that was like mind-blowing to me. And then I discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls are Isaiah, the scrolls of Isaiah, and they've been carbon dated to pre-exist Jesus, the time that Jesus would have existed. And if you compare the Isaiah scrolls to the scrolls that we use for like ESV translations, for example, they're identical, exactly the same. So there was a prophecy about Jesus that has been proven to exist before Jesus walked the earth as like a material person. And that was mind-blowing to me. So I logically converted, and then it took a little bit of time, and then I repented for the abortion, for being an occultist, and I received the Holy Spirit, and like I was healed of cigarette smoking. I felt my desires change. Like I had been a lesbian for almost a decade before that. So like those desires though have like completely melted away. And I don't know if that was, it's a heart change. You know what I mean? So
talk about a paradigm shift for you, because you go from a worldview that's completely informed by emotional decisions, right? I mean, that's very much what it seems like. And I do think that emotion, because we're emotional and we're logical, and that's kind of the divide. And this negative spiritual realm feeds off of our emotions and manipulates us through them. So you go from a world that's dominated by the emotional viewpoint to a world that is navigated quite successfully, considering where you've ended up in your spiritual path. It's dominated by logic. It's
by facts,
by logic.
not caring about your feeling. I took almost the same exact steps. Like Larry Elder, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, which is the top lobster name that's from his book about the lobster. Yeah. Joe Rogan. And then I don't know where you're at now, and I don't know, that's your own path, but like I kind of not that I outgrew these people, but I feel like they've changed a little bit. Their messages.
They're a lot more about censorship now or whatever. I don't know, like the weird stuff about like censoring free speech on Twitter.
And Peterson too, when he's going off about like you gotta take the vaccine, like he's
Yeah,
just kind of
something-
spiraling about it. And
There was a change. There's money involved. There's other nefarious, but it's one of these things where they'll tell you 100 truths and then this one lie to deviate you from the path. And I'm looking at Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, which I never knew his real motives, but to me, they've deviated from the path that I'm going towards right now. But it's fine because they put me on this path, and they kind of the same thing. Like I was like, I had to like really listen to what this guy was saying a couple of times because I was resistant to what he was saying, but something about it made me come back to it. And good for you for like, because it's hard when you have somebody like basically debunking your entire ideology and your entire worldview. It's real easy to be like, screw you and never go back. But like you went back and you listened, you're like, wait, there was something here. It bothered me.
I can't even bring myself to re-listen to Ben Shapiro. And you went back, you were like, I know that was hard, but there's something here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it wasn't, it was more so like Clavin. I couldn't stand Ben Shapiro for a long time. Like the whole, what was it called? They had like this whole movement where it was
intellectual
like
dark web.
Oh yeah, the intellectual dark web.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I still have, you can see Peterson's books are right here. I have both of them, and they serve a purpose, but he had a tendency to reduce everything to strictly allegory. And these allegories being maps by which you can, navigate and become a more effective person in your yourself, to your family, to your community. 5 years from now.
He misses a lot of like the spiritual stuff, but
the actual spiritual stuff.
Maybe
he's
like I think
right there, but not there. He's like right on the edge, and he won't.
And I'm having trouble deciding if is that nefarious or not.
Is that it's purposeful, but there's also a tier of people like how you're describing. Like if you're a blue-haired feminist, you're not going to come to this show and have your mind changed. This show is for people who are already sort of red-pilled and we're taking that next step. So there's like levels and portals that you've got to step through in order to get to, I guess, where I'm at. And I hope that we're at where the truth is, or at least where we're like one step closer. We're taking that walk. But Peterson had his dissection of the book of Genesis is tremendous.
Yeah,
he misses a lot of important spiritual points, but the philosophical reasoning that he applies to it is just like it's irreplaceable, and it's something that I've listened to a bunch of times, and I should go back and listen again. But I just feel like lately the world has gotten like we're moving real fast to wherever we're going. So I'm like, all right, we have to catch up, and we've got to tell the people. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe everyone has their place.
Peterson really nails raising children.
Yeah,
I think he nails that, man. I think he nails that. And it's a shame what's happened to him. We'll always have these books, of this guy who was. And it was incredible information. It was very important, but
I think he's a human being,
Yes,
he's human just like the rest of us. And
that's provided that it's even him anymore, because I look at that and I'm like, is that Sacha Baron Cohen in a two-tone suit? I don't even know anymore. I don't know if that's really him. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's just a dude.
Yeah. And like there were a lot of people who were saying, oh, he's the last prophet and things like that, because he seemed like this wise man that the world really needed. And we did need him.
Yeah.
And I think, he was ringing the alarm long before, or years before everything fell apart with like the gender stuff and the attacks on free speech. And even David had a fall, David had a fall, Moses had a fall. All of these men of the Bible are human, and they all had their pitfalls. Solomon, they all had, God used them and he was with them, but they fell away at some point,
Yeah.
and like he can still redeem him and bring him back. But I think it's ironic how his claim to fame was freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And he has like reneged on that because of what was it? It was
he
wasn't he
was
trying to censor? It was about
demon trolls on Twitter. He's blocked me on Twitter for being a demon troll when I was just telling him that I was telling the
His
truth
own
as I saw it.
creation.
You created me. Now look at me, Father. And I'm going to tell you. But now my breaking off point with him was right around COVID, where one of his things, his claim to fame to me was tell the truth or at least don't lie, and don't apologize to the mob.
Yeah.
And it's like 2021, and he's talking to Trudeau on Dave Rubin's show, and he's like, I took your damn vaccine, now give me my freedoms back. And it's like, that's not how it works, Jordan. You knew that from 2018. You've said that, it's in your books, and here you are making a deal with the devil for something that they're not going to give you back.
Right.
And like, how many people have you led down the wrong path, whether you took the vaccine or not? It's just like you're encouraging people to do this. And same thing with Ben Shapiro. He's like, oh, my wife's a doctor. It's just, I was like, listen, next shooter, next person up, you have a huge audience, and you're leading them, and I felt like you led them astray. So I'm like, well, now thanks for the work you've done, but we can't make idols out of these people. We have to take the information they give us and continue to get new information from other people, or do it ourselves. And here we are.
This perfectly highlights why it's important to follow Jesus Christ and to not idolize a man and follow a man, because we're always going to fail. We're always going to misstep. We're always going to fumble. And if you're following a man, well, then the line stops there. All of a sudden, you're standing in front of Jordan Peterson. He's laying on the ground in tears on benzos, and you're going, I don't know where to go anymore.
And it's partially my fault, right? Because I've made it a point in my life not to follow man, but it's still in some sort of way. I mean, look, Top Lobsta, I have put him on this pedestal, and I have these expectations of this guy. And when he falls short of them, I'm very harsh at him. And maybe I'm, maybe I've said things to him that were a little too rough for him. He saw it and he blocked me.
Would you be open top to Jordan Peterson redemption arc? Would you be there for it?
I don't really care.
I'd like it.
Good for him, but I feel like I've moved on, and he could help other people, but for me, it's just like I'm doing something else. But
I need him to come out, and I need him to be like, I was wrong, I was a fool, and there's a huge spiritual component, and demons are real. That's what I need. I need that. I need that. That's what I need.
I agree. That would be amazing. He comes out proclaiming the gospel. But
we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you ask him if he believes, and he's like, well, what do you mean by God? And what do you mean by if? And it's
Belief,
like,
somebody said it. They were like, what do you mean by and? I think it was.
What did he say? I behave. I act like I believe.
Yeah, I behave as if there is a God.
Right.
Yeah, and this is true. It's true to a certain point. I told a bunch of people that I know that as well, that a lot of people do behave as if there is a God, but do not say it with their mouth. So it's like, well, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless you have anything left on the table that you feel compelled to share, go ahead.
Okay. So we talked about, like, that's how I became a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went down this path where I wanted to be a witch and a Christian, and I wanted to do New Age,
little white magic.
Yes, little white magic. I literally was trying to do that, and then the whole COVID happened, everything happened, and we ended up like moving out to the middle of nowhere. And I started going to this Baptist church, and we had been kind of looking at churches where we lived before, but I experienced a lot of like judgment or whatever at the Baptist churches. Okay. I don't, anyway, we ended up at a Baptist church out here, and my beliefs and my understanding of the Holy Spirit were refined, and eventually like all of that New Age stuff like fell off. And I became like a more solidly, I had like a solid foundation to stand on, like a truer understanding of the Bible. And like I stopped looking for like reincarnation in the Bible, like trying to, like people would use like calling John the Baptist Elijah as proof that they believed in reincarnation. But it's not true. And like in the Bible, it says like you only die once. Okay. So I started going to a Baptist church. I'm still a member there now. And everything was fine until I came under like very severe demonic oppression. And like as a result of that, my beliefs have shifted again. And it's sort of like, I think that I had like the religious understanding down, and then true Christian spirituality has now like come into the picture. So like the gifts of the Spirit and the Holy Spirit and like the authority that we have over demons has, I now understand all of that and am in a very real way, experiencing those things. Yeah. So with the demonic oppression that I came under, I had just given birth to my third baby, and this was earlier this year, and she is perfect and amazing, but we stopped going to church because I had a newborn. And so I stopped reading the Bible. I wasn't really praying a lot before that anyway. Like I would pray for like before meals, or like pray like some before bed, like thank God for the day, whatever, go to bed. And so that's where I was spiritually. And my husband gets me this book, and he was so excited about this book and he really hyped it up. And as soon as I got it and opened it, I realized I didn't. Okay, so it was a hand bound, like $160 book, and it had a giant pentagram on it and Freemason symbols, and it was a book on the history of symbols. And I flipped through it to the Christianity section, and the first thing in the Christianity section is information on Buddhism or voodoo, and like how voodoo is done. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I accepted this book and I put it on top of my refrigerator. And I didn't look at it again. But then my in-laws came to stay with us to see the baby. And I was like, oh, they're Southern Baptists. I got to hide this book. So I hid the book and I moved it back to my bedroom. And I put it on my dresser. And then we all started having nightmares. My youngest son started seeing, he called it the happy monster, like the happy monster from the playroom. He would like scream terrified and like hide behind me.
Happy.
And he'd be like, the happy monster is here. The happy, he's only 2. So like how he explains things is he's still coming into language. But anyway, he would say the happy monster is here. And I would rebuke it. And he would say that it left, but then it kept happening. And I started having these dreams where like I could not say Jesus, like Jesus would not come out of my mouth. And my husband was having nightmares. My children were having nightmares. Everybody was like seeing weird stuff was moving. And we started going back to church again while all of this is going on. And while we were singing, the words that I was trying to sing, I sang "Hell Will Reign Forever." That came out of my mouth. And I was like, what is going on right now? And like trying to rebuke this thing would not work. Like it would work and like things would disappear, but it kept coming back.
Right.
And that experience taught me a lot. I learned about like the legal rights that demons have for Christians. Even like Christians, you can come into agreement without realizing it with a demonic entity, and the entity can control you. It can like go into you even as a Christian. And that is not something that like I believed or understood at all. And God, I think God finally gave me a dream where I saw the book, and I knew that I saw myself as a teenager doing occult like rituals, and I saw the book, And then I knew that there was a demon there, and I was trying to scream for Jesus, and I could not say, Jesus would not come out of my mouth. And I was like getting sleep paralysis and the whole thing. And finally, after this dream, I realized the book. I have accepted this book into my home. I have put my husband's feelings above God and above what I know God wants. And so I confronted my husband about the book, and he said that he thought it would be like reading about Hitler, where like it's harmless, it's kind of interesting. It's like dark and spooky, but there's no harm in reading about Hitler. And I was like, no, I have renounced all things occult. And as soon as I said that, I felt this oppression lift off of me. And like I felt lighter, and like all of like the fear and anxiety, like I picked up vaping and stuff again. And like while this was happening, and like I don't know, as soon as I said I have renounced all things occult, I felt it leave me. And my husband got upset and he took the book away, and I felt like everything like leave, like the darkness leave. And he sent the book back, and that began a whole journey. This all happened before the thing where like my son was attacked and had one in him. So these all happened this year, but I feel like God was like teaching me, So like he allowed this to happen, and I repented for idolatry, repented for like accepting the stuff into my home, and begged for his mercy. But like in all of this, God has really used it to open my eyes to the authority that we have as Christians. And the church is so dry right now. I think like the Pentecostals aren't, and like charismatic kind of non-denominational churches, I think have like a much better grasp of like what's going on. But by and large, like all these Methodist churches, like the Baptist churches, like I love my brothers and sisters in Christ, but it is dry as a bone. And like the Holy Spirit like is there and accessible, and like prayer is like how we tap into that power, the power that we have. And I think there's something in us as humans that desires that power, that desires the supernatural, which is why the New Age and the occult and all of these things are so popular now. And there is a space that the church needs to step up and fill. And like we have to be talking about spiritual warfare. Even Tucker Carlson is coming out about his demonic attacks. And like it is very real. And there is a very serious need in our culture now of people that are willing and able to stand up with the Lord and like break people free of these chains and let people know like there is power in the Holy Spirit. It is not weak. It is not you just let everything like trample over you, and you just like stay in your corner and pray and hope everything turns out okay. That is not how Christianity is supposed to be. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus went out and he set people free, and we are supposed to be doing that. So yeah,
Man,
that's what
I think we're about to see something like that, some kind of revival. I just like kind of how we discussed with like a Jordan Peterson type. I'm excited about it, but I'm weary about the not the outcome of it, but I'm weary about the players in it, because there's a lot of people that are noticing that that's happening, and they're already moving to fill these positions. So which way they move, I don't know. I just keep your eyes on God, keep your eyes on Jesus, and it's going to be fun the next couple of years. I think it's going to be a good time, but I'm just keeping my head on a swivel for the delusion or the trickery that might come with this, because that's
they're gonna try something like a UFO or whatever, some sort of like, I don't know. You're right. Like they're like the enemy and the people who are his minions essentially like are going to move, and it's going to be deceptive. Like it's just how they work. But I think, like you said, keep your eyes on Jesus, keep your eyes on God and the Holy Spirit. I think that I think the Holy Spirit is going to, like, we've had like a lot of emphasis on Jesus and God, and I think that the Holy Spirit is missing from the church. And it's a triune God. So anyway.
I think that, well, on that topic of the deception that's coming, that Top is anticipating, and I agree with that sentiment. I can feel it too. And I'll not be following what's his name, Russell Brand, anywhere. Thank you very much. But
Yeah.
on the topic of this dream that you had, you said you had a dream where you could see yourself when you were a teenager and you're going through these books. And we did an episode recently with Heidi Love on Mormonism. And I think what that episode did for me was it made it very clear that the practices that are happening today are the same practices that were happening in the beginning. It's all sort of like this Solomonistic magic, right? The idea that Solomon bound these demons and had them do his will using various sigils and stuff comes from extra canonical texts. But I think it makes a lot of sense because you can see the echoes of those practices still happening today. It's the same entities. It's the same practices, the same magic, the same ceremonies, the same rituals.
Yep.
And I think that that's what that dream, nothing new under the sun, right?
That's
and I think that that's what that dream was like, look, you're doing the same thing. If the through line is Solomonistic magic, which maybe it's not, I could be wrong. Who cares? But if there is a through line and it's the same practices, what you're doing in your witchcraft practice is the same thing that's happening in these Freemason halls. It's just different degrees of decorum. You know what I mean? As far as like the level of the ceremony and
it's all a rebranding, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I feel like that's what God was trying to show you in that moment was like, you're beholden to the same exact practices right now. It's just sitting on top of your fridge, but it's another book for another people, rebranded, you know, packaged differently. It's the same thing though.
Yep.
And
man, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Tom.
I look forward. I look forward to talking to you again. I don't know how much time, but I feel like you're gonna have a pretty good testimony, maybe with your husband and what happens in your life, because it seems like you're at a point here where you're gonna do something pretty cool. So
thank you.
Yeah,
I want God to use me. Like that's my primary thought. Like I want God to use me. I want to help people who are where I was, which was blinded and deceived, and all of that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, God bless you. He kept your logic intact. It's funny because you don't use something for so long, you think it gets rusty and dusty, but I think you navigated your way out of that using logic in a way that a lot of people wouldn't have been able to do. So, and I mean, it's all for your benefit and also the benefit of your family. So, well, thank you very much for sharing your story. This was excellent. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was really refreshing to hear. Oftentimes we have people on the show who are experts in some, maybe they're a theologian of some sort of biblical theologian, or it's not often that we get to talk to somebody who came through that path that you did. I came through it in a similar way, but I never adhered to anything and I never practiced anything. It was just what first caught my interest. But you, being in it, practicing it, immersing yourself in it, and then coming out of the other end, I think that testimony resonates with a lot of people because, like you said, I think you nailed it. Right? We don't have this spiritual connection in the West. So when witchcraft comes along and shows you these things that, are filled with truths, but fundamental lies, they're very attractive to people. And the church is dropping that ball. Maybe it's our lot, which really the church needs to look at itself. Why on earth are shows like this doing the job that they should be doing?
Yeah, I agree.
But there's a vacuum, there's a void. And, voices like yours need to step up and fill that void because I get the feeling that time is short. But thank you very much for coming on the show today and sharing this. One more time, I know you don't have much in the way for people to find you, but I'm sure there's going to be people that are interested. So could you just let folks know?
You can find me on Instagram at Mama Shah OC. It's private at the moment, but just send me a friend request and I'll add you on. I need to update it. But yeah, you just feel free to reach out if anyone has any questions or anything. Thank y'all so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Like, I love the show. Y'all are speaking truth into the darkness.
Thank you. That means a lot. And again, thanks for your time. This is amazing. And I think we'll be back. We might have the rest of the week off, David.
Do we
I don't
really?
know.
Are we talking to Ed this week?
No, not this week. Sorry, guys. But
what are you gonna do?
maybe we'll figure something out for these people. Maybe we'll do something last minute in a couple of days. But thank you again, Mama Shah. I don't want to dox you. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
Awesome.
Peace out.
Bye.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture